My name is Melissa Ziobro, and I am the Specialist Professor of Public History at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. Today is September 27th, 2021. We are here today with Monmouth County Commissioner Lillian Burry for an interview to augment the exhibit Monmouth County 9/11 and its Aftermath. This interview is being recorded with the permission of all participants. Commissioner Burry, can you just confirm for me that you do indeed consent to the recording and that you understand this interview in full will live in the public domain?
Without question.
Thank you, ma'am. Of course, people can go online and read your extensive biography, but can you just briefly tell us about your early life? Where did you grow up?
Believe it or not, I was born in Manhattan, New York City, and my parents, who were actually immigrants, but became citizens very quickly from Italy. They didn't come together. They met at the site of downtown actually it was Greenwich Village, through family members. There were a lot of family people down there, and they were quite extraordinary people. At any rate, after some time, I guess probably 5 years after my birth there, which was at St. Vincent's Hospital, and it has since closed, so it's a pity to tell you how long I've been around, and some of these fixtures are no longer here. But at any rate, my father decided it was a good idea to raise the family in the suburbs. So what would you consider the suburbs at that time? It was Brooklyn. And that's where I grew up, literally in Brooklyn, with my sister, who is 3 years younger than I am. And she is a very accomplished educator, early childhood education, really, and found herself with the Montessori program, and everything seems to go back to Italy, anyway, in our lives. She did study with Montessori, and of course, who was Italian, and quite a legend in the field of early childhood education. I, on the other hand, decided I was really in for political science and history. Hence, I graduated from Wagner College with a degree in both those areas. I then was elected to the National Society of Historians. I wasn't quite a historian yet, though, but at any rate, I just say stretch the rules a bit. And at any rate, so from that it evolved. I met my husband at Wagner College. We are still together, and that's a remarkable, because if I tell you the number of years, it will reveal a lot of other things. But at any rate, we have a daughter, Lenore, and she in turn had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and they're remarkable grandchildren, I have to say. My granddaughter, Stephanie, who graduated from Monmouth University, is vice president of her company now, after graduating a good 10 years ago, I guess it was. And my grandson, Vito, is in Chicago, and he has been elected or named one of the top litigating attorneys in the state of Illinois under the age of 40. So they're both accomplished in their own rights. And now the grandson has provided my husband and I with 3 great-grandchildren who are remarkable, and you can't help but love them when you see these 3-year-old, 4-year-old, no, 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. The 7-year-old is the professor, and the 3-year-old lives up to his name, which is Rocco, and he is a Rocco. He's a rock in the true sense of the word, but he's just beautiful. So the 3 of them are quite a a remarkable trio. So I have always been immersed in history, in preservation of history. I know all too often we as a society feel that it's an inconvenience to preserve our history. No, that's not the way the Europeans feel. And their history goes back much further than ours. But we have so much to be really proud of. And so that's pretty much where I have landed, if you will, and that is in preservation of our past. And of course, that doesn't mean I don't want to move forward, because I do, and I believe very strongly in preserving things that in turn become a very important part of our present existence. So this is going to take me to that horrendous day of September 11th, 2001.
It is so moving to see you talk about family, and family obviously means so much to you, and we're going to talk more about how your family was impacted on 9/11 in just a moment. Let me ask you though, your parents' story sounds so inspiring, and you wonder, right, if they could see their great-grandchildren and their great-great-grandchildren, what they would think. What did your dad do for work?
My father, he was one of the owners of Delmonico restaurant in New York City, which was downtown, and still is. It's not in the family anymore, and that's at Beaver and William Street. So we kind of, my husband and I carried on the tradition. We were married at Delmonico's, and then our actual wedding ceremony, church ceremony, was in Trinity Church, right downtown there, where Alexander Hamilton is buried. So we don't anticipate being buried there, but it's really quite a beautiful, beautiful church. So and many times during our lives, we end up we link to this area, and which is downtown New York.
Yeah.
So.
And did your mother work outside the home?
My mother she was a true stay-at-home mom, and wonderful, loving person, always there for us. At that time, because I attended all of the public schools in New York, you'd go home for lunch. My mother would have hot lunch for us. I mean, how foreign this is today. And then she would have us take our pinafores or our dresses off, and she would iron them. So we looked crisp and clean. And what a different world that was, let me tell you. But good memories.
So you told us a bit about your education, marrying your husband. How do you and your husband wind up in Monmouth County?
How did we wind up here? I guess that's the trend, if you think about it, because we both graduated from Wagner College. He a year before I did, and then we went on to work on our master's degree, and we took an ill-fated trip out to South Dakota, and where he was to get Donald, my husband, was to get a master's degree in paint chemistry, because his field was chemistry. And so, and that was one of the best schools in the country for this. His father owned a large paint company, so you can see how it sort of comes together. Well, when we got out there, Fargo, North Dakota had been destroyed by tornadoes, and there was no housing available to us or anything like that. And one of the professors had suggested that maybe I could live in with one of the recently widowed professors and assist in the housekeeping. I said, well, that's it. Now we're leaving. And it didn't take us but a couple of hours to pack up the car and back to New York. And as we arrived, everybody was very surprised. Well, you just left. Well, we're back. So that was the start. But at any rate, so we had settled Uh, no, really. We did settle in Staten Island for a short time, close to the college. And then we realized after having our first child and whatnot, that we really needed more space and whatnot. So that's how we ended up here in Monmouth County. We bought our first house in Matawan. I got involved in the government there, became one of the first women in Matawan Borough government, and I was elected to office. And as they say, the rest is history. My husband continued with his position. He went to the Roman Haas Company, which is a chemical company, and did very well. He ended up being a regional director, and he covered quite a large territory. So that's pretty much, and then and we didn't move too much in Monmouth County. After Matawan, we ended up in Colts Neck, and we're still there in Colts Neck. So in Colts Neck, I made my mark there as well, because I became the mayor of Colts Neck. I also was on the committee, and that was for a year, about 9 years. And then somehow, the fickle fate finger, but I ended up running for freeholder. And lo and behold, I was elected. And it turns out I was the first woman director of Monmouth County Freeholder Board. And it's been quite a journey ever since. I've been doing this for over 16 years now. Now no longer a freeholder, thank you, Governor Murphy, we are now county commissioners. Now, I don't think there's anything distinctive about the word commissioner, but it was considered by the governor, and I guess others who could make the decision, that it was a racist terminology and had racist roots. Well, truthfully, it wasn't, but it evolved with history, and the fact that we had Mr. Gums from Matawan as a freeholder who was black, and that Lillian Burry should become the woman freeholder, and in turn one of the leaders of the freeholder board. I would say we evolved properly. So, but we're not changing back.
Now, we'll bring it up to the month of September 2001. You were not a freeholder yet. You were in Colts Neck still,
Yes.
in Colts Neck politics at that time?
I was the mayor. Yeah.
You were the mayor in September of 2001. Okay. So, roughly how long had you been mayor at that point?
Oh, maybe a couple of months.
Couple months?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's talk about the day of September 11th.
Yes.
Before we started recording, you were recalling the weather. Tell
Yes.
us about the weather that day.
The weather was memorable. It was clear, crystal clear. Skies were blue. It was crisp, a wonderful September day, only to be marred by what was about to happen a little after 8 o'clock that morning.
Do you recall what was supposed to be on your agenda that day before it all?
It was going to be my normal activities. I was preparing to go to my office. I do own a real estate office in Colts Neck Realty, and also I would always make a stop at the town hall in Colts Neck to see how things were going, if there were anything that needed attention, and so I was in the process of preparing for that kind of a day. Little did I know, or anyone for that matter, how we would end up that day.
Do you recall the moment you first heard something was happening?
Do I recall? I always dress with the radio on, and then sometimes I put the TV on as well. And I hear on the radio, it seems a small plane has hit the tower, the World Trade Center, and it's smoking. But they still thought of it as an accident. at that point. But then it was a matter of maybe a half hour after that, suddenly there was another plane that hit the tower. And that was really riveting. I mean, I couldn't get moved after that, but I did continue to get ready, get dressed, because I knew my place was to get out of my house and go to the town hall. And it turned out that was a very necessary move, because, first of all, Earl Ammunition Depot is within minutes of my office, of where I live, town hall, and certainly if you wanted a good target, you couldn't do better than the ammunition depot. And Earl plays a very important role in what follows after that, but I don't think I need to get into that right now. So the rest and my husband, now he tells me that he had retired at that moment, and he was watching it on the news in the family room. I don't remember that at all. I remembered being alone. Isn't that terrible? And so at any rate, but from that point on, I just took the reins. I finished dressing, but I got a phone call in the interim from a relative, the wife of Stephen Patterson, who was my first cousin, and was her husband, and he had just called. He wanted to say good luck to his he had twins that were born 3 years before, and they were first day of school. So apparently they had him on the phone, only to find out that this had happened. Now he was with Cantor Fitzgerald, so he was in the North Tower, all the way up on the 143rd floor. So with this looming down on us, and poor Lisa, and absolutely incredible with those babies and whatnot, but of course the family got together on that, and I was told, go ahead, go to the town hall, and I did. At that point, Earl Ammunition Depot had been locked down. They were out, the Navy people were out on the road on Route 35 with their ammunition drawn, and no car moved. It was just silence. And it was a very, very dramatic morning. And it didn't end there, because as the time evolved, as you know, we find out there's another plane hits. And then the towers start to collapse. And we heard about the Pentagon. And then Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And you got the feeling that we were really under siege and at war. It was very unnerving, but realizing full well that you have to keep going and be strong. And of course, incredible people around there. As it turned out, we lost 5 people in nothing like what Middletown went through. I think they were up in the 30-something, something like that. But at any rate, an impromptu thing, we called the town and said, we'll all gather in front of the town hall as the sun goes down. At that time, we didn't know what the heck was going to be happening. And we had a vigil, a candlelight vigil. It was quite a turnout. And I was expected to say something. And I said, look at the person next to you, the person behind you, the person in front of you, and just give them a hug. I prayed. It was an incredible time, but we kept going, and after that, we had to gather up our strength and our situation, try and evaluate where are we, where do we go from here. And I had been in touch with our Congressman Chris Smith, and he was in Washington at the time, and he wanted me to at least say hello and introduce myself to the Undersecretary of the Navy. And now that I think of it, Chris said to me, "Good for you. You talk like no one else would have said what you said." So at any rate, in talking to the Undersecretary, I just wanted him to realize how close we were to the epicenter. And here we are, ordinary Americans, and trying to explain the situation to them was really next to impossible, because nobody understood it. Nobody knew what was happening. But we gathered up our forces, and I think we did register that concern with them, with the Undersecretary. So it was getting back to my cousin, who was Stephen Patterson. He's listed in the face of the eagle at Mount Mitchell as from Hazza. Well, that's where he grew up. But at the time, he was living up north, where a lot of the Cantor Fitzgerald people were. But I have to tell you that Lisa, his wife, my dear, dear cousin Lisa, walked the streets of New York with his picture for a week, hoping that maybe he got out. Maybe somebody saw him. So you talk about heart-wrenching. It was a very, very difficult time. But you knew you had to go on. You couldn't. And the other thing that came out of this, from my point of view, is people were never more proud to be Americans. There were flags everywhere, everywhere. And people came together. They were very supportive of each other. So I hope it doesn't take another tragedy to bring that about again.
This is a difficult question, but was your cousin ever found, or any of his personal effects, anything Lisa could have?
Yeah, interesting you should say that, because there were a number of people that have never been identified. They found his wedding band. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. About 6 months after it had happened. Yeah. So, yes, that's what they did. They found them. But I must say, now, a good number of Cantor Fitzgerald personnel were wiped out as a result of this. But the company was very good to the family and the survivors. So it allowed Lisa to really live very comfortably with her children. They're beautiful now. One of them, the boy, Wyatt, was actually autistic. But to think that and what it did was it energized her to work on behalf of autism. And she actually got to know Chris Smith, Congressman. She was in Washington. She gave testimony. And so if a good comes out of it, that was it. Now Wyatt is living on a beautiful farm upstate New York. She has since moved there, and he's just a delightful young man, and he's doing well. He really is doing well. He likes the Jersey Shore for surfboard. He's a great surfer. But and then his sister was a sweetheart, graduated from Dickinson College, and she's been very, very productive. So the family and these wonderful people went on despite the tragedy.
The strength of the families and many of the widows in particular is something that I have just been floored by in doing this work.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
You referenced your conversations with the Undersecretary of the Navy. Was that at a visit at Earl that happened after?
Oh no, this was on the telephone from Coates Neck to Washington. That's when Chris was there.
And how were communications between your office as the mayor and the military officials at Earl? Did you feel like there was good?
Wonderful, really wonderful. And they have always been. I've always been, excuse me, particularly close to the commanding officers there, and have, in essence, represented Earl in county government, in local. So it, no, we were a very good working relationship. Yeah, and you know, they have the pier that goes out into the bay, and my daughter lives in Atlantic Highlands, so she always has a full view of what's going on there. So prior to the Iraq invasion, if you can call it that, everything was quiet. There were a lot of ships out there. What they were doing was loading up the ammunition. And she then called the next morning. She said, "Guess what, Mom? They're all gone. All the ships are gone." And they took off on their mission. So that's how close we are to it.
Yeah. Do you recall who were some of the key players in your government at the time, in Colts Neck government?
In Colts Neck, who were the what?
Some of the key players. So did you have an Office of Emergency Management, a Chief of Police who were,
Yeah,
working with you?
Yes, we did. And also it was Ben Forrester, who was the deputy mayor. I mean, he was a great man. He has since died. He's no longer here. But he kind of kept everything pretty much on a level keel. And everybody was very involved and very supportive. I would say we did well.
Did Colts Neck do anything to support the 5 families of individuals who had died?
Did we do anything?
You referenced the vigils.
Oh yes, we had that, and we also put up what we call the Garden of Remembrance, and that's right near the town hall, and it's a beautiful fountain, which was designed by Jim Gary, who was an internationally known sculptor, and he was native born to Colts Neck, and a wonderful man. He's no longer with us, but what he left behind, he had conceived of this sculpture with a lot of symbolism in it, and he had the lotus flower, and it's just as beautiful today as it was when it was first put up. I was part of the committee to decide on what we would be doing, as were Jim Schatzel, a number of active local people, and it really turned out beautiful. We didn't want it to be looking like a cemetery. We didn't want it to be something that was not welcoming, but rather foreboding. And today, you go there and you still get that feeling of connection and relief and what have you. We kept the 5 in mind, the number 5, because there were 5 lost. So each one of them has a bench with their name on it in a semicircle, the fountain in the center. We have 5 white dogwoods around, with the idea, white representing purity. There were 5 butterflies that he designed that come out of the fountain, and of course the metamorphosis of the butterfly. And if you look at it, and I really invite you to come and look at it, because it's really a remarkable, delightful thing. It's so much better than seeing the 2 buildings in granite. I mean, what does that do for you? I don't know, but and we do have ceremonies for the family. We continue to do that. Some of them have moved on, others are not. But there are a number of them have stayed in Cold Snack and have literally built a second family. So, in fact, we had a ceremony in which the daughter of one of the deceased appeared, and she lives in the area now. In fact, she just got out of law school, and she talked about memories of her father. She was 5 years old at the time, and that she would periodically come and sit on his bench and communicate with him when she needed that strength. And so we kind of felt we did our job. And so that continues on. It's a nice, see, rather than we must not forget, we want to remember. We wanted, the whole theme was to remember those who had gone, but remember what they were when they were here. So,
at the national level, we see a lot of changes following 9/11. So the Patriot Act, right? Everyone's trip to the airport was changed. But you've been involved in local government for a long time.
yeah.
Did you see any changes after 9/11 in local governments?
I would think people were always and continue to be interested in their community, in preserving what's good in the community. It doesn't mean we all agree on everything all the time. That's not the case. But I think Cold Snack in some ways is quite unique because we're kind of like an oasis, because we have preserved so much of the open space and so much of the land, and our past has been and continues to be the equestrian environment, and of course the horses are having a tough time now because there's no money for this. It's an expensive sport, and but at any rate, no, I would say Cold Snake has, maybe you might say it hasn't evolved at all, and it's still back in the old days, but no, they have. I mean, particularly now with the change of attitude towards wanting to get out of the city, and so all of a sudden we became the country. So that's where everyone wanted to be, in the country. So it certainly affected real estate values. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Mm-hmm.
Is your real estate firm still active?
Oh my goodness.
It's a fascinating time for real estate.
Yeah, but you know what? It's not a good time, because if you have a client and you're out there, you don't know if you'll have that. You like that house? Good, because it was just sold an hour ago. And for more money, invariably more money than what it's listed at. So it is a very difficult time, very frustrating, not for the seller, but for the buyer. The seller, no, you can be almost guaranteed you're going to sell your house.
This is slightly off topic, but given your vast experience, do you think we're in for a bubble burst like 07, 08?
Not the same, but I think we are in time.
I asked you about local government changing. Do you feel 9/11 changed you personally in any way?
Well, maybe value life a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And don't take things for granted, and made me a more determined person. Not that I have never been. That's my problem, is they say, boy, she never gets off something. She wants it, she's gonna do it. But seriously, I'm very involved with Fort Hancock. I feel like I've been enlisted into the armed forces with Fort Hancock, and that's a restoration project. And boy, it needs it. And then Fort Monmouth is the other. I've been on that authority since the Army exited, and we're doing really very well there, because we're free to sell the property. And I just think that the federal government is so happy to get rid of it, of course. So, no, we're doing very well there.
You mentioned the intense patriotism
Yes.
that was evident following 9/11. Can you talk to us a little more about that?
Well, it was true. I mean, there wasn't an establishment, a house, that wasn't flying the American flag. And though I'll tell you one thing, though. I think in some ways it was very parochial, because we go to Martha's Vineyard almost every year for vacation, and we happened to take some time after this all went on, going up through Massachusetts, and then we didn't have the same feeling we had here in New Jersey and in New York, Pennsylvania, those that were close, that were truly affected. It isn't that they didn't understand or weren't aware, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't. It's something. But no, it was a very, very patriotic time. And the idea of someone burning the flag was treason.
On the flip side, do you remember any anti-Muslim or anti-immigrant backlash during that period?
Yeah, I guess there was. Because I never approved of anything like that. But there was, yes.
What are your thoughts on the so-called global war on terrorism that follows 9/11?
I wasn't in a position to do anything directly, and I guess at that point you had to have confidence and of that those in office that could do it were doing the right thing.
It's a hard question. You talked movingly earlier about the need to preserve history, and so much of your career has been advocating for that. Do you think we as a society have done a good job of preserving 9/11 history on the national level and here in Monmouth County?
Well, I think, let's bring it down locally. I think here in Monmouth County we have, as evidenced by what we've done in Colts Neck, what you see in Middletown, what you see as you travel the county. I think New York has done a remarkable job with what they have. I know my great-grandchildren had occasion from Chicago to visit downtown New York and see all of that, and believe it or not, these little ones were moved by it. And wouldn't you know, they would land right where Stephen Patterson's name is etched into the granite. Of course, Stephen was our dear cousin who died. But of course, children are remarkable. They feel the moment, but then they can go on to other things.
Do you think that we are safer today than we were on 9/10/2001?
Safer? No, I don't. I don't like to think that way, but I don't think so.
So we must remain vigilant, would you say?
Oh, I would say yes. And communicate and talk. You know, it's a problem. All too often is a lack of communication. And I don't care where you are, even on this level of county government. Communicate.
Do you mean between individuals in the same office, different levels of government, or just generally?
All the way around. Absolutely. If we don't understand each other, if we don't take the time to understand what is the cause of this problem or that problem, you're going to head for disaster in the end. Well, we see some evidence of it now. Kind of sad.
We have a lot of young people, I have students in college who weren't alive on 9/11.
Yeah.
What do you want this younger generation to know about 9/11, right? If you had to boil it down, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to remember about 9/11?
Well, first understand, was there a sound reason for this to happen? And were we doing the right thing at the time? What brought this on? I think it's worthy of investigation, worthy of thinking about it. And how can we avoid it ever happening again? And we can, and I think we have to a degree, but there's more to be done. So we just have to learn to stop shouting at each other, screaming. No. Anyway, I don't say that we should all be candidates for a Nobel Peace Prize. It's a little exaggerated, but yeah. I think they have to. It's just like Pearl Harbor, a day that shall live in infamy. Well, that's been said about September 11th. And did we learn from that? Was even more widespread, if you think in terms of how we ended that war with the A-bomb and all of that. At least we didn't have to be that reactive.
Well, I think that's a very insightful place to end as far as my questions are concerned. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we have not covered?
No, Melissa, I think you're wonderful in doing what you're doing and how essential it is. We talked about preserving history. Well, that's what you're doing here right now. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. It's my honor.